Just imagine a future world where only unknown machines had the power. This advanced machine was literally located below the Eiffel Tower. The story begins in 1967, where a boy named Frank had come to a very large exhibition. Frank had worked very hard to create a flying jetpack and was showing it to a manager named David. David asked Frank if the jetpack was functioning perfectly. Frank explained that there were still a few issues, mostly due to the numerous buttons. Because of these problems, David did not accept Frank's project. However, nearby, a girl named Atina was watching Frank's project and was quite pleased with it. Frank, feeling very disappointed, went outside. Just then, Atina approached Frank and gave him a lift. She asked him to come with her. Frank, who had no idea what was going to happen, boarded the lift with Atina. After entering, a machine began to examine Frank. The machine showed the same level as Atina had, and thus, Frank was granted permission to proceed inside. Frank found himself in a very strange place via a waterway. Later, he realized that it was an extremely advanced elevator. The elevator started moving upwards at such high speed that Frank couldn't even stand properly. After a few minutes, the lift stopped. As Frank exited, he found two advanced robots waiting for him, who began to fix the jetpack that Frank had created. The robots repaired any malfunctions in the jetpack. Just then, Frank saw two unknown people approaching him, causing him to panic. He suddenly fell, but since his jetpack was with him, he quickly turned it on and started flying before hitting the ground. Frank noticed that he had arrived at a completely different place. As Frank was taken away, 6 years had passed in the world, bringing us to 2015. By then, the flood had become extensive. We now see a girl named Earth on Earth, who was very skilled in technology but often caused problems in NASA's launch missions. If NASA's covert mission succeeded, then her father, who was an employee at NASA, would be of no use, and he would be dismissed. To prevent this, she continually hacked NASA's systems and canceled projects. One day, while she was engaged in these activities, the police caught her. She was kept in custody for a few days, and after serving her sentence, she found a label pen on a bench, similar to the one Frank had found many years ago. When someone touched this unknown pen, everything around them instantly changed. It was a very advanced world, but no one from there seemed to notice. Suddenly, a countdown started for the pen. The imaginary world began to disappear. It was then realized that it was an imaginary world. She explained everything to her younger brother, and together they began searching for information about this type of pen. After a long search, they found information about the pen. They went to an address they found on the internet, which led them to a very old store. Inside the store, the husband and wife were astonished to find that the pen was extremely valuable. They began asking everyone where the pen came from, but no one could tell them. Therefore, they started using their advanced technology to fire at people, causing chaos. Many people were hiding to save themselves. Suddenly, Atina arrived. She was the one who had helped Frank years ago. Now, she was fighting against the two storekeepers on her own. Eventually, the store, which was a husband and wife robot-operated shop, was destroyed in an explosion. Atina rescued some people and took them away as the place exploded. Atina continued to explain the truth to the people. In reality, she had not kept the magical pen herself, and she also revealed that the advanced world they had seen was called Tomorrowland, and it existed in another dimension in reality. Atina now had the last remaining pen. Adina used to search for people on Earth who could go to Tomorrowland and create various inventions. One day, she arrived at an unfamiliar house and managed to evict someone from it. This house belonged to Frank, who had become quite old. Adina persistently requested Frank to let her in, but Frank refused to listen. Frank had made it clear that he wanted everyone to leave permanently, but Adina spent the whole night waiting at his door. The next day, Frank noticed that someone had tampered with his tractor, so he went outside to investigate. Adina took this opportunity to sneak into Frank's house using a golden opportunity. Once inside, she locked the door from the inside and told Frank that she would only let him out if he took her to Tomorrowland. Frank, feeling desperate, found himself in a room filled with screens displaying different scenes from various places on Earth. The atmosphere was one of complete devastation, and Frank saw a timer indicating that there were only 60 minutes left. Frank had entered through a window and began questioning Adina about the countdown. Frank revealed that the countdown indicated that the entire Earth would be destroyed in 60 minutes, and no one could save it. He also explained that a few years ago, he was expelled from Tomorrowland because he had invented a strange machine that could be extremely dangerous for Tomorrowland's future. Despite the dire situation, Adina was adamant that Earth would never be destroyed and that she would not let it end this way. Suddenly, the screens flickered and went black, and the likelihood of them restarting decreased. Adina couldn't believe that the positive attitude of someone could make such a difference. Meanwhile, Frank noticed that some officers had arrived at his house. They were there to capture someone. Frank had already prepared for this, so he quickly took someone with him and left. He boarded a rocket that launched just before the robotic officers could arrive. Frank fell very far from his house, landing by the river, which saved their lives. On their way, they encountered a herd of elephants, but Frank was very angry with Adina because she had first met him when she was a child. Frank once thought he could spend his entire life with Adina, but she turned out to be a very advanced robot. On their journey, Adina told Frank that someone had an incredibly sharp mind and would be very beneficial for Tomorrowland's development. Frank, believing Adina, went to the top of the Eiffel Tower. He explained that while many might think the Eiffel Tower is just a tourist attraction, it was far from it. In reality, scientists had built a teleportation machine that could transport people to the future world known as Tomorrowland. Many scientists had used this machine to travel to Tomorrowland and make countless inventions. As a result, Tomorrowland was highly advanced in technology. To bring this machine outside, Frank turned on some switches, causing the Eiffel Tower to grow in size. This sight was the first time the entire world saw such an event. Frank, Adina, and another companion boarded the machine, and they quickly reached Tomorrowland upon activation. The three of them were astonished by the advanced world they saw. As soon as their location was detected, the governor of Tomorrowland, named David, came to interrogate them. David told Frank to leave with his friends, but Frank calmly explained that they were making a grave mistake. Although everyone knew that Earth would be destroyed soon, Frank revealed that the positive attitude of someone had significantly reduced the chances of disaster. This meant that someone possessed unknown powers that were altering their future. To prove this, Frank took David to a large machine he had built when he first arrived in Tomorrowland. This advanced machine had been the reason for his expulsion from Tomorrowland, as it displayed the future 5 days ahead. In a short time, Frank had learned to operate the machine, and they observed the condition of Earth, which was gradually being destroyed. Asteroids were falling everywhere, and humans were preparing for the end of their existence. However, no one believed this information. They refused to accept that Earth could ever be destroyed. As a result, the imminent destruction around Earth suddenly transformed into a lush, green landscape. Frank realized that these changes were due to someone's positive influence, but David deliberately ignored all this information. After some time, Frank was discussing things with someone who revealed that the machine was sending high-frequency signals to Earth to observe both the future and the present. The strength of these frequencies was so high that everyone on Earth could sense that the destruction was real, filling their minds with negativity. People were not taking any action to save themselves. Therefore, someone advised Frank that they needed to destroy the machine as soon as possible because if the machine were gone, the negativity affecting people's minds would also disappear. Frank tried to explain this to David, who already knew about the situation but was dismissive. David assured Frank that it was not true. Despite Frank's insistence, David decided to send the three of them back to Earth. Before leaving, Frank shook hands with David and pressed the button to open the portal to Earth, thereby opening the door for their return. Frank got into a scuffle with David, and during their fight, they ended up passing through the portal and arriving back on Earth. Meanwhile, Adina and another person were attacked by a large robot. Adina handed a dangerous bomb to someone, which was meant to destroy the entire machine. With the bomb, Adina went to a high place, but due to the destruction caused by the robot, the lift began to fall. Despite everything, Adina and others managed to destroy the robot, and the bomb was fully activated. So, they threw the bomb onto Earth, where Frank and David were fighting each other. When they saw the bomb, they both rushed into the portal to escape. But shortly after, there was a massive explosion that caused some damage to the machine. David ended up trapped under a huge structure, and Adina felt a sense of fear. David cunningly manipulated his gadgets to harm Frank, but Adina intervened to save him. As a result, Atina's internal system was completely damaged. Frank was deeply saddened by the situation. Atina revealed that she had loved him since childhood, but she was a robot, and she preferred not to tell him this truth because if Frank had known, he would never have become friends with her. Now, Atina activated her self-destruction mode and instructed Frank to take her to the top of the machine. She said that after the explosion, the entire machine would be destroyed. Frank used his childhood jetpack to take her to the top of the machine, and they set it up. The resulting explosion was enormous, destroying both the machine and David. Thus, Frank and Atina managed to save Earth. They decided to live with their families in Tomorrowland. Frank and Atina became the new governors there, overseeing the entire system of Tomorrowland. And that's how our story comes to an end.